I know what time it is, so I'm going to get on out of your way, but there is a book that I've read a bunch of books, but one of the books that I really appreciate is one entitled Contending for the Constitution. And it's a great book, and it was written by two authors out of the Providence Foundation, out of Virginia, I believe, if I remember their office locality correctly. And it's a great book, and it talks about contending for the Constitution, and it gives some in-depth reporting on what was going on when the founding fathers gathered together to create an instrument of governance for this country. The word contend or contending speaks to strive in competition with or to struggle. And I like one of the definitions says try very hard, to enter into and engage conflict, to be in a struggle, to debate or be part of controversy. And that is just what's happening or was happening on the spring of 1787 when a group of men came together in an effort to make this infant nation called the United States a better place. The end of the Revolutionary War was not the end of challenge. These individuals realized that something had to be created that would give this nation even a greater permanency. So they came together trying to improve something they already had. They had something that was somewhat of a governance doctrine or document, and they were working to make certain that what had been fought for would be retained. And I guess that will never stop being the case and not being the situation with America. As with anything great, you're going to have to fight to maintain it. Well, as someone said, that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and someone always has to be on guard, and someone always has to be willing to defend that which has been created. When we look at the individuals who started this great nation and fought so hard, I appreciate how they went to took on the task of fighting to create this government and to create a set of rules and laws that we could live by and enjoy the peace and tranquility that comes from a people that understand how to respect one another. As I read this book, Contending for the Constitution, by these two gentlemen, there were some insightful things that we learned as we read this book, and most certainly it agreed with many of the other things that we've read. But for some reason, these gentlemen, they attempted to continually remind me as we read the book that in so much that was happening, that divine providence was involved in the search and in the research and in the struggle of these individuals to give us something that would keep us together. In the report that this book gives us and speaks to, they talk about one of the first instruments of governance after you had the great Mayflower Compact and after you had so much happen with the Revolutionary War. They had the Articles of Confederation, a document that was authored by a gentleman by the name of John Dickerson, and he is to be complimented for this document. It most certainly gave a sense of some type of unanimity and some sense of what a central government ought to be like. They had phrases such as a perpetual union. They talked about something that would keep the 13 colonies somewhat connected, but these founding fathers were so passionate about the idea of remaining, though independent. Though we want to have something that will make us up into some type of country and some type of group that has a common goal and common denominator, these folks had a zeal to remain free. They'd had an experience. They had experienced what happens when folks lose their freedom. They had understood what tyranny was, and so they were determined as they started this experiment called the United States of America that they had to have an instrument that would keep things in order. But something happened, and they realized after a while that as well as these Articles of Confederation or the Articles of Confederation had served them, they needed something more. Then you get into this interesting report in this book of Contending for the Constitution, when we're reminded that these individuals said, well, it's good, but listen, we're not getting along. There's some things happening that's causing some confusion to be in the midst of the colonies and our relationship. And so there was this great George Washington who had saw individuals who once had been friends now beginning to have moments when there was strong disagreement. So he decided, let me try to get everybody together and sit down down and create an instrument that might be able to resolve some of the problems. But the instrument that he wanted to create, let me correct that, he didn't want to correct the Articles of Confederation. He wanted to improve them. But there was a divine hand behind this gathering, and there was something more to be accomplished than just improving on what already existed. So the historians report to me that they had delegates from a number of states that came together. It's interesting when you look at these individuals and the great men that started this nation. I think it's interesting to note that 7 of the delegates had been state governors, 8 had signed the Declaration of Independence, 20 had fought in the war for independence with the Continental Army, and almost 3/4 of them had already served in the Continental Congress. 29 of these men were university-trained graduates of Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, William and Mary, Oxford, and other colleges, and even a few from abroad. And then there was the fellow like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, who might not have had a formal education, but they had a good education. They came along when there were only books. How I wish for that day sometime that there was only books and we didn't have those distractive monsters in the front room called television. But these wise men came together, and inadvertently they stumbled upon the necessity to do something beyond just correcting the Articles of Confederation, and they ended up trying to work out a plan that was better than the one that they already had. But before I go any further, I was also most certainly impressed with these gentlemen's dedication to the task. They came from various backgrounds. They had much to say about many things because they'd experienced so much in life. But I also noticed that one writer tells me of these delegates, most had to personally finance their trip to Philadelphia to participate in the Continental Congress deliberations. Many of them had to, at great expense and at their own expense, sacrifice so much of their livelihood and their life for this gathering. But because of the type of people they were, they said the sacrifice was not too great to preserve this nation. I believe now we need individuals with that same kind of spirit, that the sacrifice is not too great for the preservation of the United States. I really believe, as I look at what has happened since the last election, that America has never been in greater jeopardy than she is now.